Welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast, where we spotlight powerful stories and the brilliant minds behind them. I'm your host, Chris Dabbs, and today we're honoured to be joined by Jim Maiwurm, visionary leader, international legal expert, and now author of the newly updated novel Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction. Set against the backdrop of a politically divided America and a fractured global landscape, Jim's book explores what it means to seek purpose, relevance, and truth in a world that feels increasingly unmoored. Through the eyes of protagonist Salt Pepper, a retired government insider drawn back into the halls of power, the novel delivers a smart, sharp, and unexpectedly human take on the crises we inherit and the dysfunction we must confront. From the pain of personal loss to the complexity of international diplomacy, this story is equal parts timely and timeless. So stay tuned as we dive deep into the characters, themes, and real-world insights behind this thought-provoking and entertaining read. So let's say hello to Jim. Jim, hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you folks. Glad to be with you and your audience.
No, thank you. This is going to be fantastic. I love this. So let's get started then, and get into our first questions. I'm really interested to hear what inspired you, to write Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction. I mean, was there a particular event or moment that sparked the idea?
There was not a particular moment. It actually was a sort of a collage of events and circumstances that came together. And it really started in, let's say, 1999, because I was at that point facing a law firm's mandatory retirement. Wondered what the heck that meant for me. And then I had some illness issues that had to be dealt with. And after that, I was also sort of watching what's going on in the world, and in the United States in particular. And what did that all mean? Not for me, but for my friends and neighbors, and more particularly, of course, for my children and the grandchildren, including a little white dog that might show up a little while we're on tape. I'll give you a warning. We have a loose barker.
Sounds like my dog.
That's okay. It was a collage of things that came by, and you say, well, what are we going to do about the future here? Because we all of us, I mean, it doesn't matter whether in the UK, in Europe, in the US, in Asia, all of us want to leave the world better than it was when we got into it. And that's a hard thing to do in this day and age, because there is concern among younger parts of the population that it's really not going to be better than it was for their parents or their grandparents. And so you worry about what kind of condition are we leaving the world in, politically, financially, whatever. And so it was those things that came together, and I was most concerned, I guess, in the immediate future there. And this book also came and gone a couple of times. One time I got I was tired of it, and I threw it in the closet for a year. So it warmed up over time, but I just wanted to leave something that expressed a view about what we ought to be focused on, what are the real things that we ought to be chewing about in the political world and in the economic world. And I was trying to put that in a way that made sense and that was chewable in the terms of not being 500 pages with 200 footnotes.
Right. Well, this is the problem, isn't it? I guess. And is that why you chose to, open the book on Inauguration Day in the US in 2021? I mean, quite a politically charged moment, right?
It was. There was a lot of politically charged moments over the past 5 years. And but that was I wouldn't call it the exact event, but what happened in 2021 was, of course, a predecessor of lots of things, good, bad, and ugly, however you want to characterize it. And so yes, that I can still remember watching the January 6th events at the U.S. Capitol. And I can appreciate that, our friends around the world were as concerned about that as we are. And they're probably as concerned about events today as they were back in January of '06. And so it's a lot of things pulling together here that caused me to write the book and to revise the book as time passed and try to get it so that it was more or less timeless, but also relevant in terms of understanding the background.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking again about background, really, it seems that your protagonist, Salt Pepper, is retired from government and the legal industry as well. So, how much of Salt's character is actually drawn from your experiences or people you've known? Because it sounds a bit like you.
It sounds a little bit like me, but it really is based more on people that I have known. And one of the messages about that's a good comment and a good question. One of the things about that that's important to understand is that what Salt was one of these people who was a really good, down-to-earth person. He didn't carry a lot of ideas of grandeur around in his back pocket. He was just a steady guy who you could trust. And there are lots of people like that in the U.S. government that are important to the way the U.S. government processes things, decides things, implements things. And we've, of course, seen the good, the bad, and the ugly about that in recent times, too. And so one of the messages out of the book is we have some very valuable people like Salt Pepper, who is really how should I say how should I say he was sorry, you're gonna have to cut it there.
Yeah, that's all right. No, don't worry.
Anyway, so a lot of things about what's going on today that are relevant to the factors I was considering when we went into the book. But really, what I want to say is that people like Salt Pepper make the United States work. They make the UK work. They make Europe work, and they make Asia work. So it's, and people around the world we have some really strong people. For example, just think about what's going on right now with nuclear cleanup. Nuclear scientists do not grow on trees. And people who are expert in U.S. trade policy and trying to figure out how you manifest your goals in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis with tariffs, for example, to pick a daily topic. Or you could talk about what's going on in the medical world. Very strong people in the medical world in the United States and in other parts of the world. But we can't be throwing out you can always make changes that are prudent, but you shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And that's what's happening, I believe, and that's another part of the story behind the book is that there are some really good people who care a lot about their jobs, their service, what they're doing for mankind, whether it be on infectious diseases or what else. So I think Salt Pepper was part of that group of people who were good souls, reasonable, smart people who are trying to adjust things for the better good.
Right, I'm with you. So Salt is retired, right? This is what's happening, and then
he was retired.
Yeah, and then he's pulled back into public service because, well, you can tell us in a minute. But what does his journey say about purpose and relevance? Like you were saying about the nuclear scientists, they don't grow on trees. So about a purpose, relevance, and aging as well, because if he's past retirement date, yet he gets dragged back in, as it were, then was that a good thing? Or is that a bad thing? What do you think about that?
I think it's a good thing for the right person. For example, I would be probably justifiably characterized as a workaholic. If my wife was here, she would confirm that. I think he is going counter what he really wanted to do. What he wanted to do was go to near the Virginia mountains. It's a very nice area. That's where he had an ancestral family farm, and he was there to sort of clean things up, slow things down, and get out from the hustle and the bustle and some of the cynicism that exists in the Washington area on almost anything you can pick. So I think he was trying to get away from that. And in the wake of his wife's death from COVID, and she was a nurse who died as a result of exposure to COVID in the early period of COVID's growth and explosion. And so she was a person who actually accentuated, I think, some of what he was trying to do with his life, and then but he's trying to figure it out, and he's doing it probably way too compressed a time frame. And the therapist would tell you that you can't do all of that that fast. And I'm no therapist, but I get the point. And I think what he was doing and how he got roped into this was because he thought it was a worthwhile project, and it was for a better purpose.
Mm. No, absolutely, and I guess that's a way to deal with grief, as you say, and also retirement and loss of identity there, I guess. So, how did you balance these deeply personal themes with the broader geopolitical plot that's happening, well, that was happening at the time? Because that seems to be, quite a juxtaposition, really.
It is. It's a completely different existence that he was going back to. Now, the good news is he had been practicing law in Washington, and that creates a certain body of connections and reputational issues that can be good or bad. But he was recognized as somebody who was not somebody out trying to grab headlines. He was out trying to figure out what is a best process to make things better. And he was I think feeling, they didn't have children. He and his wife did not have children, and so he was looking for something to occupy him in a good way. And I don't think he was out to be a crusader, but he was out to figure out how he could do a little more good in a good, active way before he passed on to being a true retiree.
So that makes sense then. Okay, so Salt has a relationship with a female colleague. I mean, how does their dynamic drive the story forward?
Well, it's another element of the story. I mean, if you look at the book, what we tried to do was pick. I wouldn't use the word themes, but stories that sort of level the playing field among certain groups of our population. And what we're trying to do with the younger lady was, keep in mind this was about the time of the Me Too movement was at its height, and the DEI movement was at its height, which is another topic we could talk for about an hour on, which I don't really understand what's going on there these days, but probably the word the wise nothing. I mean, it's just so. But anyway, I think she was younger, more athletic, a better shot, wanting to make her mark in the world. Was sort of decided on public service, had lived and grown up in France, went to the Sorbonne. So she's a person in her own might. I mean, she's not the lead here, but she's a lead. And what we're trying to do is make sure that a young lady with smarts and guts had an opportunity to play with the first team. And this was not the reserves on the field. This was a real team, and he and her managed to work together, even though their ages were diametrically opposed in some of their politics. And so we're also using them to sort of illustrate how people of different political strains can actually compromise and make things happen.
Well, this is it. So you've actually, I mean, your novel presents like a critical look at partisanship and dysfunction also in US politics, which is kind of what we were saying there about being able to agree to disagree, I guess, on politics between the two. I mean, what do you think are the root causes of this kind of division nowadays?
I hesitate to say what I really think, but I will. I think a lot of it is fear.
Mm.
It's not an analysis not an analysis that you'll hear very much. But I think if you looked at, let's take the male-female dynamic, since we were just talking about that in the context. Men are worried about women overtaking them, and where does the man sort of stand in relation to the rest of the family, and is there some sort of autocratic road you can follow as the man of the house? Well, I think that stuff went away for a long time ago. But today, I mean, like yesterday, there are things going on that would cause you to just sort of blow your mind, because there are there are people in this world who are actually organized around the idea that there ought to be male domination.
Mm.
Oh, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to be kidding me.
Well,
Where
yeah,
did that come from?
you just
Where
need to
did
be a
that
little
come
bit
from?
older, I think, to realize that's not necessarily the case all the time.
Yeah. No, some of this is younger. There are young people who want to be male dominant. I think that was gone a long time ago. But that's just an example of how something can rise up. And so the book sort of deals a little bit with the tension, younger woman, more elder man, and trying to understand. He's concerned about getting in trouble with a young colleague in terms of the Me Too movement, and she's worried about getting a fair break. So that's where what's the difference between those two? It's a narrow field.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, and at the
Sorry
same
about my
time,
phone here. I thought I had turned it off.
that's all right, no problem.
And there's the dog. That's just to make it complete.
Exactly. Well, you see, this is the thing because Salt's busy enough, right? His mission takes him to the White House, Europe, the Middle East. I mean, how do those settings reflect the real world challenges facing American diplomacy today? And I think you touched on one of them earlier on, didn't you?
Well, the president wanted to have somebody out there who was trusted and, more importantly, perhaps trustable, if that's a word, and somebody who could, sort of tell it like it is and gain the free flow of discussion that's necessary in order to get to that point in discussions. And so he was sent out sort of on the sly to take the temperature of people who were important to the world and to the United States in particular. And so while he was doing that at a political level, there are also personal things that are going on in his life and in the world that affected him. And some of it was, his wife's death as a result of COVID. Some of it was moving to a small town of 1,700, if you looked at it today. It has all the issues associated with small towns. It had a college or a small university which is facing issues these days having to do with academic freedom,
Mm.
finance, whatever, call it whatever you want to, but there's a whole bundle of issues associated with higher education in this country, and I think in the world. What's it all about, and why are we having a fight about it? That's another example. When you think, why would you empty your labs, empty your sources of quality progress in terms of dealing with disease, for example? Why would you empty the cupboard of good people? And so you have to be fiercely uh, feeling negative about that because it's just crazy. And
Mm.
so anyway, SALT sort of takes you through these various things. So we're trying to deal with real life as well as the political thing, which is sort of at a higher level. But the political issues are sort of a bigger version, I guess I would say, of what's going on a day-to-day basis. And all these little things come together. And what we were trying to do was not only use a collage of ideas that came into the putting the book together, but also have the book illustrate a collage of issues and thoughts and not to resolve any of them, because this is not a book about resolution, except that it's a book about making sure that we have a process and an approach that puts people toward the middle and not toward the edges of the political spectrum.
Mm.
Because I believe firmly that if you can't get yourself in the middle and get used to the idea that there's going to have to be compromise, then you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. And we all need to get over it and take that approach.
No, I understand what you mean. So to try and avoid polarization. So is that the message that you hope readers take away about US global leadership, perhaps, and the role of,
Absolutely.
yeah, season
Absolutely.
shaping it?
It's all about, well, let me broaden it a little bit. It's about learning about compromise and learning how to respect each other. But when I said a while ago that the cause of some of this was fear, I think, and we started talking and then I trailed off on my own track there. But to go back, the fear theory goes into things like race and goes into things like the battle of the sexes, and because we're worried about some other group or some other person or somebody else in some other part of the world and what they're going to do to us. Today you might be concerned about the fear of what's going on in Pakistan and India. So every day there's going to be something that will could give rise to fear. So I think, and there's in terms of race relations, one of the things that when I was on the board of my college, the president had us read a book, and it was about a young man, young black man who was living in the same neighborhood as an older white man. And they would walk by each other each day. They're going different ways on the same area of the sidewalk. And what happens is that they sort of know each other from afar, but they've never spoken to each other. So one day, the young fellow starts whistling Vivaldi music, and the book is called, I think, "Whistling the Vivaldi." But that made a difference because the two generations there and the two races there had something in common. They both liked classical music and they both knew Vivaldi. And that was an icebreaker. So you didn't have fear injected into that. You had commonality. Mm. So, if you both like Vivaldi, you got something to work from. And so that's what we've got to be working from more generally in life and in global politics. Because if you think we're going to get there through war, you've got another set of problems, but we don't have time to deal with mental health, but that's a whole set of issues too.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And, you're talking, despite the serious subject matter of your book, it's also been described, though, as light and occasionally humorous. So, how important was it for you to inject some levity into the narrative? Because, some books can be a bit too heavy, can't they?
They can. And, we've all had discussions with somebody who said they started the book. It was just in another book, not mine, of course.
No, not yours.
Another book, for sure. We've all had situations where somebody said, I couldn't deal with this book. It just made me angry, or it made me sad, or it made me, just uncomfortable in various ways. And so I didn't want this to be. I want this book to be provocative in terms of thinking about how people can act and how they ought to be thinking and how they might approach one another. But it's not designed to be, creating enemies. It's designed to create what's common. What do we have in common? A lot. And what can we do together? A lot. And when do we know it? Now.
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, I suppose that and your approach really to blending fiction with elements of real political history and current events, helps as well to keep interest for the readers and to keep the story moving on. But I mean, how did you approach blending those two things together? Because you want to be able to, well, I don't know, if it's real political history and current events and you've got to fictionalize the middle part, how does that work?
Deal with people issues in the process. And I would say it's not that easy, because you have to sort of keep track of what your balance is and how things are working out, and are you creating. What I wanted to do was create a surge of thought, and you can pick Trump 1, Trump 2.0, or whoever you want to pick. I don't care, because it's not the result that I'm focusing on here. I think if we get the right approach and the right types of activity and the right kinds of volume to what's going on in the world, these other things will not solve themselves, but will get clearer and closer to a solution.
Mm. So did you write this novel with any particular audience in mind, bearing that in mind? Policymakers, everyday citizens, or maybe you just wanted to talk to both sort of camps?
I'd say all of the above. There goes my phone again. I would say all of the above. It's really designed not to be, it's not intended to be for a small audience. I think, a teenager would get one level of input from it. Somebody my age, which is way older than salt, pepper, get something else. So your economic stage of life, has another thing that sort of comes into here. And, right now you've got young people, a lot younger than me, who are worried about what are they going to do about housing, What are they going to do about medical expenses? What are they going to do about education costs? So all of these things blend into different people in terms of where they live, how wealthy they are, how they live. But we ought to be able to structure a system and an approach that allows each of these people to thrive if they want to thrive. And if they don't want to thrive, that's okay too. But we want them to be safe. We want them to have an opportunity. We want to dissolve some of these false senses of fear that I think contribute to some of our problems. And fear is a hard thing to combat. But if you recognize that it's not a particular race or a particular sex or a particular orientation, and sort of you want to reduce all these differences to sort of a who cares? They're a person, and they deserve to have our respect, and they deserve to have a voice. And life goes on from there. And so we want to bring people in, not throw people out. We want a bigger basket of people, and not a smaller one. And we want that bigger basket to sort of collect around a circle that creates the round table that we're looking for, so to speak.
Yeah, that would be very nice if that happened. So I always feel that fear is weaponized, I think, by politicians sometimes, and well, actually most of the time. But let's not go into that one because we could be here for a long time.
That's a long story too.
Yeah, exactly. So let's not do that. But let's go back to the book. So, what have readers been saying? I mean, especially those with a background in politics or diplomacy. How are they feeling about the book?
Well, I haven't gone back and done a scientific try to figure out who all the readers are, but I will tell you that I am really gratified by the number of people who have written reviews. The quality of the reviews is very high. We're off the chart. We're not killing each other in terms of our volume, but the message is getting through, and the book is got tracks now, and so I have I've read a couple of these letters that come back, through the whatever system you're on, Amazon or whatever, and the quality of our reviews are really, really high, and some of them really quite touching, and so there are people out there who get it, and what we need to, from my perspective. The story behind the book and the goal is we need to multiply the number of people who get it. And if they get it, then they need to implement it. And that's what the book is about. And you try to build stories that sort of get you into that tower of getting it. And that's what we were trying to do. And it's a different kind of a book. It's not your romance novel for the beach. But it's a different animal though, and I hope we can have some people get some thoughts about what we ought to be doing collectively, and I think some of these reviews are supportive in that sense.
Yeah, sure. Oh, well, again, that's really, nice to hear. It must be gratifying for you as an author, that people are getting it. So, yeah, let's move more towards that, right? So, looking at the real world today and the things that are happening, current issues, you mentioned a few already in our conversation. I mean, do you feel like any of these events or figures have literally stepped out of your book?
Some did. Some stepped out of it, and some stepped into it. Yes, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure out who I was thinking about, and when I was writing part of the book. But the important thing is, I was also writing about people who were fictional, but the common man or woman. And the reason I wanted to have a little bit of humor in it, and it's not a lot of humor, but. There's no sex or violence in it. It doesn't have all the things you need to, I guess, to hype the market these days. But what we wanted to do was to provide a framework, I guess I would call it, for thinking about things, in your own living room, where you read a book or open the paper on a daily basis. And I think we're getting some traction. And this is not a Martin Luther King event, because that's in a whole different realm of situations. But one of the things that drove me, I'll take a few seconds. So after the Trump 1.0 election, it was actually the election after Trump 1.0 where he lost. I'll never forget the tape of Trump talking to people in the state of Georgia in the U.S. And he was saying, I only need 11,000 votes out of the whole state of Georgia. Now, we ought to be able to get that. And so they were talking about, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they were trying to talk about how we could get 11,000 votes. And I thought to myself, God, if all you need is 11,000 votes to swing a national election that has global implications, we ought to be paying a lot of attention to that, where those 11,000 votes are moving on the chessboard. And it's sort of, I just thought, maybe, what we say about voting is that, one vote counts. And that was a primo example of, 11,000 is a small fraction of the number of votes that were cast in Georgia that year. And so you can, with modest infusion of energy and thought and action, you can make a change and make a difference. And I wanted the book to make a difference in terms of not how people came out, but how they went into the process and thought about it and socialized ideas and issues with their friends and neighbors and their bridge club members and whoever it happens to be, the guys down at the bar or the pub or whatever. We wanted to have a little bit of impact on that dialogue. And that's a little bit about how I think it all fits together. So it all have to be dull and drab. It can you can tell a story about what happens in the bar or what happens in a wedding shower. It doesn't matter. You can find so many incidents of hope in lots of places, but you need to think about it. That's all.
No, it's interesting that, because, I mean, so do you see Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction as a cautionary tale or a roadmap or something else entirely? Because it sounds like you're saying it's a roadmap for some people.
Yeah, I wanted it to be a little bit of a roadmap. It didn't come with a driver, but you do get a roadmap, and that's I would say, yeah, that's a fair comment. No, that may be pretty. That's probably pretty presumptuous. But get over it and take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, Jim, that's great. I think we've got to wrap up now. But listen, thank you very much. That wraps up another episode of the BrightWord Books podcast. A huge thank you to Jim Maiwurm for joining us and offering such thoughtful reflections on his novel, Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction. Now, this book is more than a political thriller. It's a poignant exploration of aging, identity, and the price of leadership in a divided world. So, whether you're passionate about policy, curious about the human side of diplomacy, or just love a compelling story told with insight and wit, this book is one to add to your shelf. So grab your copy of Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction today on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more inspiring conversations with today's most engaging authors. So until next time, keep reading and keep thinking. Thanks very much, James Maiwurm, for joining us. Thank you.